afterwards in case you want to pick anything else back up. So I'm going to hand over to Rashawn from the University of Cambridge, who's going to give a brief presentation on what it's like to study as a postgraduate student there. And he's going to hand over to 2 current students, and then there'll be time for some questions at the end. So, Rashawn.
Great, thank you very much, Hayley. Thank you, and to Stephanie for inviting us to join this series. And I hope the series so far has been useful, and hopefully today can build on what you've heard from some other UK universities over the last few weeks. So, as mentioned, my name is Roshan. I'm the Deputy Head of Student Recruitment for the international team based in the Cambridge Admissions Office. So we work centrally in the university on behalf of all the different departments and schools and colleges that make up the university. We'll talk a bit more about Cambridge and the way that we're structured in a few moments. The kind of plan for today is I'll set the scene, provide a bit of context and some information for how we're structured as a university, what it's like to be a postgraduate here, and a bit about the admissions process. But then we'll have some time for questions, and we'll be joined for that by some of our current students as well. Adelaide is with us at the moment, so I'll just pass over to her to introduce herself, and then she'll be back a bit later on to join us for the Q&A. Adelaide.
Hi, I'm Adelaide. I'm from the US. I'm currently studying for my PhD in Italian at Clare College, and last year I studied for my MPhil in the same subject at the same college. And so even though I'm studying PhD in Italian, it's kind of also a PhD in history in a way, because I study Italian women's Holocaust testimonies, which my undergrad at the University of Virginia studying Italian and history prepared me well for.
Great, thank you, Adelaide, and thanks for joining us this afternoon UK time. So we'll get started. I think one of our other students, Aniruddha, might be joining us a little bit later on, and when he's here, we'll ask him to introduce himself. But first of all, what does the UK have to offer, and what does Cambridge have to offer? Well, a bit of a recap, and you'll be, of course, very familiar with this, but postgraduate study in the UK can really be divided into 2 different types of study. So master's programs or PhD programs. At Cambridge, we often refer to the different courses that we have as doctoral or non-doctoral programs. So the doctoral programs, the PhD programs are a part of our postgraduate offering, but a big part, and where many students will start their postgraduate journey, is what we would typically call the non-doctoral programs, the master's programs. So as a reminder, in the UK, typically master's programs are 1 year of duration. The programs that we offer at Cambridge do vary slightly dependent upon the subject and the department. So there are some that are predominantly taught programs, and there are others that have quite a significant research component within the master's program. The qualification that students would end up with will be slightly different at Cambridge as well compared to some other UK universities, in that most of our master's programs are what we call MPhils. So where students at other UK universities may be awarded an MA or an MSc at the end of their year of study, most of our courses are MPhils. We do have some what we call MRes, so Masters by Research. And then the other thing that you'll see at Cambridge is MST, so Master of Studies, which is typically a part-time course, normally over 2 or sometimes 3 years. But the MPhils are the majority of our master's programs as a 1 year full-time program. In many subject areas, students would need to complete their master's level study before progressing onto doctoral programs. And in terms of those doctoral programs, well, as I'm sure you'll be familiar, UK PhD programs, and Cambridge fits in line with those, are typically between 3 to 4 years. There may be some slight differences, again, depending on the subject area and if students need additional research time, but typically 3 to 4 years is the standard. Some students will actually enroll with us on what we call a 1+3 option. So it will be a master's and a PhD program within one course of study over a 4-year period. And of course, the doctoral study is that much more focused research and much more intense, perhaps in many ways, really focusing down on a subject area and a particular niche within that subject area, whereas the masters can still offer a bit more flexibility and can allow students to take, as we call, papers at Cambridge, or modules that you might hear elsewhere from other subject areas. So just as a reminder, well, we think the UK has a lot to offer at postgraduate level, and that can perhaps be broadened into these three areas. And I think what the UK does have to offer is really strong. It gives students that opportunity to really focus on a subject area in depth, to prepare themselves for a future academic or other career. And it can do so in such a variety of ways through the skills that they will learn through either a taught or a research-based programme, which is, of course, common at many universities and certainly at Cambridge. So we've just included this slide here just to share a few links. You may have seen some of these before, but to share with students who are looking at the UK, there are a number of different resources out there from individual universities as well as organisations that work across the sector, that work across universities, such as the British Council, the UK Council for International Student Affairs, and many others as well. So just worth noting those if you haven't come across these previously. So I wanted to spend a few moments now taking more of a deep dive into the University of Cambridge. And I've included this picture, partly because it's one of my favourite pictures as the sun sets over another day in Cambridge, but it's also one because many people who have heard of Cambridge, who have some familiarity with the university, may have seen King's College and the chapel that you can see on the screen here, but may be less familiar with how the wider university works. And we are now a community of about 25,000 students. We're a community of undergraduate and postgraduate students from all over the world that come together in 31 different colleges and about 150 academic departments. So there is a lot more to Cambridge than just some of the sort of older buildings and maybe more traditional sites that students may be familiar with at first. So there's a few reasons why we think Cambridge could be a good option for many students for postgraduate level. And perhaps one of the first starting points is because of the quality of the academic experience. We, as a university, will challenge students. They will come here for either a year or perhaps an extended period for PhD research. And during that time, they will find that they are challenged, they are continually questioning and developing their own understanding, their own research and their own knowledge in their topic. It is a really strong academic community of people from all over the world studying a really broad range of subjects. And of those 11,000 postgraduate students that we do have at Cambridge, about 50% are international and about 50% are UK students. So we do welcome in students who have undertaken bachelor level study in a really broad range of contexts. And that helps to bring something, I think, to the discussions and the debates and the seminars that happen as part of the courses and really contribute to this academic community. Students will be working with world-leading experts, whether that's in their discussions and seminars, in their labs. They're part of this academic community with members of staff who are themselves active researchers who are at the forefront of their subject area. And there is that ability to really contribute and be a part of that wider academic community that I think is so important. And I'm sure when we hear from Adelaide a bit later on, she'll be able to talk about her experience in college and in her department being part of this wider academic community. So in terms of what Cambridge offers, it is quite a broad range of subject areas. We have 6 schools of study covering these around 150 departments. So all the way through the physical and biological sciences. We have a clinical medicine school. We have a school of technology, which includes our business school as well, the Judge Business School, and then 2 arts and humanities and social sciences schools as well. So in total, it's about 300 programs that are offered. As I say, some are predominantly focused on a taught master's, others are offered with a research focus, some that are offered part-time, but many students will complete their studies full time. The university's website, and you'll see the link on all of the slides here, postgraduatestudy.cam.ac.uk, has a course search, the directory for all of these courses with a summary of what it includes and a bit more detail. So that's a resource that's out there with the key topics or the modules or the papers that are covered in each of those different courses. So well worth having a look at that. One thing to mention with the majority of the courses at Cambridge is the way students will learn. And it is, of course, varied across the discipline and will vary between the sciences and the arts. But the importance of small group discussions and teaching and learning through research is really important. And you'll hear a lot about supervisions at Cambridge, which are those opportunities to meet with an academic supervisor on a regular basis to go through a particular project or some upcoming work and to have that input. So another thing that students often talk about as to why they considered Cambridge is because of the support that is out there to help students with their future careers. And one thing that I think is really quite special to Cambridge is that students, once they're part of the Cambridge community, they're part of that Cambridge family for life, and they can access the careers provision as a graduate a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, however long after graduating. They're always welcome to access our careers resources, to meet with a careers consultant outside of term time, and to have access to some of the other events and sessions that take place. We encourage students to participate in these throughout their time with us, especially those master's students who may only be here for a year, to access the careers service located right in the city centre, right in the middle of the university in the Student Services Centre, early on in their studies, and to join for one of the many sector specialist careers events that take place. But as I say, students have access to that when they're a graduate and a member of the Cambridge alumni community, so they can come back to us at any time and access many of those services and facilities. And just worth noting, there are, of course, different sessions offered and more specialist and tailored advice for our postgraduate community compared to the undergraduate offering at Cambridge as well. So something to be aware of there. So I've mentioned a little bit already about colleges, but what actually is a college? Well, a college is something that I think really makes the experience at Cambridge quite special. And again, we'll hear from Adelaide a bit later on, I'm sure, about some of her experiences at Clare, which is one of the central colleges and one of the 31 that make up the university. The best way to think of a college is really a student's home from home whilst they're in the UK. A college is where students will have access to a wide variety of support and facilities, areas to work, areas to also have some downtime and make use of social spaces, but also to access that support and that guidance through their graduate tutors as well. And the college environment is somewhere really to meet students from outside your own academic discipline. Colleges will comprise both undergraduate and postgraduate students. In most cases, there are 2 colleges that are just for postgraduates, but most have a broad range of students from all different study levels, all different backgrounds, studying a wide variety of different subjects. It isn't the case that a particular college is aligned to a particular subject. Colleges are their own independent part of the university, and students are a member of both their academic department, where most of their teaching and research will be, but also one of the colleges, I should say. Many colleges will offer accommodation for postgraduate students at Cambridge. The exact type of accommodation will vary from college to college. They're all slightly different. Some are right in the city centre and a bit older. The oldest is over 800 years old. The newest college is about 50 years old and is just a little bit away from the city centre, but most are within about a 25-minute walk or so, or maybe a 15-minute cycle of the city centre. Now, there are 7 of these 31 colleges that do have a partnership for Marshall Scholars, so that is something to have a look out for, and the full list is available on the Marshall website, so you can see which of these 31 colleges have that partnership in place. So really, a college is an important part of a student's experience and their time whilst they're in the UK, whilst they're at Cambridge. It is their base, particularly outside of their studies, from which to explore the wider university from. And in terms of exploring the wider university, well, there is loads that students can get involved with outside of their studies and outside of their research. The university has over 500 different clubs and societies. Sometimes students will be part of a group within their individual college, and other times it might be something that's organised through the main university student union, and it's a good way in those cases to meet students from other colleges and to explore a bit more of the wider university as well. And those clubs and societies, as you can imagine, involve all sorts of different interests. There are sports for activities that students have perhaps been involved with before, but also the opportunity to try a brand new sport as well. And likewise, there's musical groups, theatre groups, drama, comedy, and just social interest groups as well. And some of the popular societies are also some of the international student societies that bring together students from a particular region as well. Other things that many Cambridge students will get involved with is spending time and exploring our city. It's quite a small city, about 150,000 people, so it's quite easy to explore. And even those students who are here for just a year for their masters find that they've found their way around the city very quickly and really found their favourite spaces and their home from home within the first couple of months. I say it's a very walkable city, although many students will get a bicycle and will cycle around. That's one of the most popular ways to travel around Cambridge. Lots of green spaces. We're just starting to see the spring and the better weather here. We've had a sunny few days in the UK, and that's a chance when people really do get out and explore the parks and the green spaces that the university and that the city has. But for those students who do want a bigger city feel, the train to London takes just under 1 hour. It runs very, very regularly and is really easy to travel to London and have that contrast, I think, of a bigger city and a different experience from the slightly smaller and perhaps closer environment that Cambridge has to offer. Some of our current students, and Adelaide is one of them, are participating in our UniBuddy scheme. And I would say the UniBuddy scheme is a really good way for prospective students to meet virtually online, to chat through the platform with current students, as well as read some blogs about current students' experiences. So well worth having a look at and sharing with any students who may be considering or thinking about Cambridge. So let's just spend a few minutes talking about what Cambridge is looking for from prospective postgraduate students. Well, ultimately, we are looking at students' academic abilities, we're looking at their previous studies, and we're looking to see if they are a good fit for the department, for the subject that they will be studying or researching. So we do have some minimum entry requirements, which it's really important that students would need to meet, but they would also need to demonstrate their interest, their motivation, their preparation, and their suitability ultimately for the course that they would be a part of and the department that they would join. So the academic merit, the academic background and potential of a student is always really, really important. We do, of course, have a limited number of spaces on most of our courses, and ultimately want to ensure that students who are with us have a good experience, have a good access to their supervisors. So the numbers are always carefully controlled, and some of the courses in particular at master's level can be very competitive, which is why we do have those different requirements in place. And there are a number of steps that we go through as part of the application process. The university website will list the typical entry requirements for a course, usually related to the UK requirements. So some of our courses in the university overall minimum is equivalent to what we would call a 2-1 in the UK, an upper second class degree. Many courses, particularly those that are more competitive in entry or more selective, will have a requirement that is equivalent to a UK first. So many of the courses, if students look on the course directory, they'll see it listed as a UK 2-1 or a UK first, and they'll just need to compare that with our entry requirements for the US or wherever they have completed their bachelor degree to check the relevant score. And you can see the typical GPA requirements on screen here. But if students have any questions or need any clarification about requirements, we would encourage them just to reach out to our office, and we can just confirm specific requirements for their subject area as well. Just to mention a little bit about the cost of living and studying in Cambridge as well. We do have quite a useful tool that students can have a look at. The tool estimates the annual living costs, or maintenance costs as we call it, for somebody's time in Cambridge, and also the university composition fee, which is the fee that covers their tuition, their supervision, and their access to the support and the facilities that's offered within their department and the university and their college as well. So it's all encompassed in this one composition fee, this one tuition fee. So in terms of funding opportunities, if students weren't successful with Marshall funding, there are some other opportunities that Cambridge offers as well. You can see those on the university's website. There's a funding search with some other options. So if students weren't eligible for any reason, then they can look at some of those other areas that they may be applicable for. And it's worth noting that the funding deadlines are different from the course deadlines in most cases. So usually if students are looking for any of the funding that's offered by Cambridge, they would need to apply earlier than our main application deadline. And again, this varies from subject to subject, from department to department. So in terms of the application process, just a couple of key things to note. Well, the first thing, of course, for students is to have a look at that course directory and find their department or find the master's programme that will be right for them, and then to check the specific deadline. These can vary. Some deadlines are as early as the beginning of December, so say December 2023 for those looking to start in October 2024. That's our main intake. We can accept PhD applications at other points in the year as well. Excuse me. But the majority of our new starters will be joining in late September or early October each year. So once the student has checked the deadlines and is familiar with when they need to make their application, it is then an online portal where students would make their application. There's a number of sections to complete, similar to what students perhaps have completed before or would be completing for other universities. And at this point, they would need to let us know who their references would come from. And we do need two references to two referees to be included at this time. The next thing for students to think about will be college choice, and students would make a preference as part of the application. Normally, students would be asked to put a first and a second choice preference, and we would do our best to allocate them to the college that they put their preference on, but there is no guarantee. But a student who is accepted for a place at Cambridge, accepted by their department, will be guaranteed a place at one of the colleges. It's just a case of determining which one it would be. And we can talk a bit more about college choice a bit later. So once the student knows what course they're applying for, they've got their references, they've got their transcripts and other academic documentation together, and they know which colleges their preference would be, they'll be able to make their application. As I say, this can be as early as December. For other programs, it will be January, but the whole system is open from September, so students can apply about a year in advance, and really the earlier the better. Once the system's open, we are very happy to accept applications at that point, and we'll do our best to turn them around and to make decisions as early as we can. Most decisions will be subject to an interview, usually an online interview with the department, so that the department can learn a bit more about a student's background, their motivation, their interests, and that is looked at as part of the wider application process as well. So step 8 is awaiting that decision to hear back from us. Depending on the time of year and depending on the department, it can take a few months from a student making their initial application to hearing back from us. The departments do look at applications on a regular basis and do schedule interviews regularly, but it can take a little while. So that's just one to be aware of. It can be a few months from initially submitting before a student would hear back. So in terms of just some broader advice before we turn it over to questions, I think the first thing to say is to just encourage students who are thinking about Cambridge to do their research and start looking at the different programs that are offered. There are some quite specific master's level programs, so checking that students know not only their broader subject that they're interested in, but the exact master's route, the exact pathway would be valuable, because there can be some differences in the requirements for those different subject areas, different entry requirements, or in some cases different deadlines as well. And for those students who are looking at PhD programs, looking at potential supervisors is valuable as well. So looking at the academic expertise that we offer within our departments and matching up a student's interest will be, again, really, really valuable. So I think I'll leave it there so that we've got plenty of time for questions, but just to share that we do run an annual postgraduate open day. It's an online event. Students can join us over a number of days where we explore all of this in a lot more detail, and there are subject-specific or department-specific sessions as part of the postgraduate open day, as well as information from the colleges, and that takes place in early November every year. And we also have a mailing list that students can join to hear a bit more about what's coming up, the different events throughout the year, and some key deadlines and reminders as well. And the QR code is there on the screen for anybody that wants to scan that. That will just take you through to the website. I think I'll pause there. I'll stop sharing my screen, but we can come back to this if anyone needs the QR code at the end. And we'll turn it over to your questions. So please do use the chat feature. And Adelaide and I will do our best to answer as many as we can. And just while we're waiting for the first questions to come in, Adelaide, I wonder if you could just elaborate a little bit more on your experience of college life and how you found your experience at Clare so far, and I suppose what kind of activities you do within your college compared to what happens within your department.
Oops, sorry, I just muted myself and unmuted myself. So I'll just start by saying the way that I looked for a college, which is a little bit daunting when there's 31 of them to choose from, was I reached out to a friend that had studied at Cambridge and just asked her for what were, in her opinion, like some of the friendliest colleges. And then I kind of looked into other factors from there. I started my list with that criteria, and Clare, which is the college I ended up at, is, in my opinion, one of the friendliest colleges and a really nice place to be a postgraduate, because it depends on the college, what the postgraduate kind of social environment is like. I'm sure they're all lovely places to be, but some have friendlier, I think, MCRs, which is the postgraduate common room, than others do. And for me, coming to Cambridge as an international student, the MCR at my college was a really good place to meet other students from across all disciplines. So I wasn't meeting people who just studied Italian or just studied languages or history. There's a freshers week at the beginning of your term in Michaelmas, so in October when you first start your course, where the students who have been there longer will organize social events for the new students in college. So again, not like for a specific program, not a specific subject, just anyone who's in that college to meet each other for things like going on walks, pizza nights. I think there was a pub crawl, things like this. So I think I've answered the question about the college, at least kind of a preliminary answer about postgraduate life.
That's great. Thanks, Adelaide. And I'm sure, yeah, we'll come back if there's more questions on that. But I think that you brilliantly outlined some of the different activities and just how much happens in these smaller communities, as we might call them within the colleges. So we've had a question from Belinda asking what happens when a postgraduate applicant doesn't indicate a college choice. So I can perhaps pick that one up. The college choice is an interesting one, because some students will have a preference and will feel there's somewhere that's right for them, but just as Adelaide said, it's quite a daunting task when there's 31 that are out there that have so much in common with one another. So many students don't indicate a college choice, and that's absolutely fine. There's no requirement for them to do so. The way that the admissions at Cambridge works at postgraduate level is that the decisions are made within an academic department, and so it's only once a department has reviewed and made an offer would then it be passed over to the colleges to have a look at. So if somebody didn't put a preference down, their application would just be allocated to one of the colleges. So our advice is always, if there's a college that a student doesn't feel would be right for them for whatever reason, then they should put a first and second preference to reduce their chance of ending up at that other college. But if somebody isn't too sure, then it's absolutely fine to keep it open, and I say their application will just be passed and will be picked up by one of the colleges, so it doesn't have an impact on the decision. And for many students who perhaps aren't able to come and visit as well in person, it can be the best thing to do to just keep it open, or to be quite flexible about which of the colleges they end up at. So we've had a next question about from Lauren, whether somebody can do 2 successive MPhil degrees at Cambridge, for example, in a subject area, and then followed by a second one. I think this is possible. It doesn't happen that often, so I would need to double check with the specific departments. But I believe this is possible, and a department would just be, of course, keen to know why somebody is building from one subject area to the other, and what exactly they've done to prepare and to further their interest in perhaps a slightly different subject area. But yes, I believe it would be possible. And a question about the MST degrees, such as the Part 3 maths being reclassified as an undergraduate and not a postgraduate degree. So the undergraduate and postgraduate degrees at Cambridge, there can be some crossover. So some of the programmes at undergraduate level are 3 years, but some are 4 years at Cambridge, including particularly in some of the mathematics, computer sciences, engineering areas, where yes, some of those postgraduate modules are actually taken by undergraduate students who then graduate with a master's programme and a bachelor's in one combined course, an integrated master's, as we call it. So yes, there has been some changes there. So we've got a next question, which I think actually Stephanie has answered, around the college partnerships and whether students would have a different experience at a college where there is a link or not. And that is, well, as has been answered by Stephanie, students would be at one of the 7 partner colleges if they're a Marshall Scholar. Sorry, I'm just scrolling down all these questions. We've had a few coming in. Sorry, just going back to these ones. Okay, I think most of these are linked to the college choice. So as noted, there is the discretion of the university in terms of where a college, where a student would end up, but the majority of students will end up at either their first or their second preference college. Not all, but that is certainly the case for the majority of our students. Okay, I think we've obviously got lots of time for other questions, so please do keep them coming in. Adelaide, I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about your experience, first of all, as a master's student, and then how this year has been as a PhD candidate, how your kind of typical week has differed between a course where you had some more taught elements and now more of a research focus.
So as you just noted, in the master's program, I was in a taught master's program, which was an MPhil. So I still had some lectures as part of my course, which weren't as frequent as you'd have in an American undergraduate degree. I think as an undergrad, I had 15 hours a week of classes, which I think is pretty typical. But in my MPhil, I think I had 2 hours a week maximum, maybe sometimes 3. So it was less than undergrad, but there was still that element, which kind of helped with meeting people who were in the course and seeing an assortment of professors face to face and things like that. But it was also kind of easing you into the independent work that's typical of the PhD, in that we had a dissertation at the end of the year that was 15,000 words and essays that we worked on pretty much on our own with, I think we had an hour of supervision per essay. But in the PhD, my daily life is essentially library, cafe, writing and researching by myself. And then my supervisor will set up a meeting once every 2 weeks or so. So we'll have an hour of one-on-one contact time once every 2 weeks or so, but I don't have lectures anymore, as you might in like an American PhD. So yes, that there's that slight distinction there, is that the master's is still a bit taught typically. Some I think are research masters at Cambridge, but most of them are still a little bit taught. Some of them are more taught than others, but PhD tends to be independent.
Thanks. And Adelaide, kind of building on that, is there anything that surprised you in terms of coming from a US background, doing your undergrad elsewhere and then coming to the UK for postgraduate, that maybe was different from what you expected, or that particularly for the masters you found was very different with the way of learning, that was maybe not quite what you expected, or something a bit different?
I think what I wasn't used to, coming from, at least in my undergrad at the University of Virginia, we had so many lectures and so much class time, and we're very guided even in our essay topics. I remember professors kind of suggesting what we might write essays on, like in a broad sense. So to go from that to just having very, not vague lectures, but in my program, it was a kind of umbrella master's for all of the languages that Cambridge offers. So I personally study Italian, but the lectures weren't attuned to Italian. They were supposed to be helpful for all of the different languages you could have possibly been studying in that master's. So much more theory, and I hadn't really had theory in undergrad. So it was much more theory and much more writing an essay on whatever you want, but also coming up with it completely on your own. So that level of independence and self-guidedness was kind of an adjustment, but it turned out okay.
That's good to hear. Thanks. Just a reminder, please do keep any questions coming in that you may have for either of us. Just using that chat function. You'll see the button at the top. Adelaide, could you talk about your experience of finding accommodation in Cambridge? Do you live in college accommodation? And if so, how has it been for your couple of years in Cambridge so far?
So I've lived in college accommodation my entire time at Cambridge, both the MPhil, and I'm in my first year of PhD, so both years, last year and this year. And I would highly recommend that to any postgraduate, because the colleges tend to be able to give everyone in postgrad accommodation within the college, which tends to be really well priced and quite central, as opposed to trying to lease privately in Cambridge. You tend to find accommodation that's probably more expensive and definitely farther out of the center. So I think anyone, pretty much everyone I know, would recommend living in college regardless of what college you're in. So it's a good thing to keep in mind once you've got the offer and everything's confirmed. And
linked to that, how do you find the food in college? And also, could you tell us about the formal halls that happen in college?
So because my accommodation has kitchen facilities, I tend to mostly cook for myself. But one nice thing about going to Cambridge for postgraduate is that your college will have a formal, either just a postgraduate formal or a mixed undergraduate postgraduate formal hall, which happens, for me, it happens once a week. I have a postgraduate formal hall that I can attend, which is in the formal main part of the college usually. Not every college has a hall, but Clare does. And you sign up to eat with other people from your college, and for me, just postgraduates. And you'll have, depending on the formal, it'll be either a 3-course meal or a 4-course meal, where you sit at long tables and kind of catch up with people who are in your college, and the food's quite high quality and really well priced, and that's a really special opportunity. And also, you have the opportunity within your college, organized by your college, to swap to other colleges' formals. So even if your college doesn't have a hall or the formals aren't quite as regular as you'd like, you have the opportunity to visit other colleges, which can be quite tricky if you don't do it formally like this, because funny enough, you can't go in most of the other colleges that you're not a member of. But anyway, you can usually find an opportunity to swap to one of them for a formal dinner, which is, it's really fun to try to check some of them off and have the list going.
That's good advice, and certainly many of the students I speak to really enjoy the time when they can get a different perspective. And as we said, all the colleges have a lot in common with one another, but also those differences, some that are older and newer and different scale, different size, and different facilities. So that's worth having a look at as well. Okay, I've seen we've just had another question come in about, just take a moment. Okay, so this is a question outside of the Marshall context around funding decisions and timings and admissions. So the way that it works at Cambridge is that the two processes, although they run alongside with one another, do happen separately. So a student is considered by their academic department for admission to the university, and then also considered by a funding committee for access to university funds if they are looking for any of the funding opportunities, scholarships that are offered specifically by Cambridge. So it's worth saying that the admission and funding deadlines are different, as mentioned earlier. So students, if they want to be considered for Cambridge administered funds, will normally need to apply a bit earlier. Most of the funding deadlines are either the beginning of December each year or early January, depending on the course, depending on the subject area. Whereas the actual deadlines for the course entry for those students who may have their funding from elsewhere or maybe self-funded is typically a bit later, normally towards the end of January or February, again, depending on the subject area. So a student, an applicant, can on occasion hear back from the university as to whether they've been offered a place to actually study on the course before they have had confirmation as to whether they're eligible for any of the university funding. So I say the two processes do happen alongside one another. There is only one application form that students need to complete, and they will be considered for the funding as long as they meet the deadline. And there's not a separate application in most cases, but they are looked at separately. So in terms of the timing, yes, many students will often hear back to confirm that they've had their place on the course confirmed or the offer confirmed before they will hear back from funding. And the funding, depending on the fund that is administered by Cambridge, it can take a while. That could be up until June typically. So unfortunately, some of the funding decisions can be a little bit slower than the academic decisions. And so just a follow-up, interested in students offered admission. So normally, again, this will depend. So the question is around the timing, whether students need to reply before they've had their funding confirmed. Not usually, so we do have quite long deadlines, but also if students are waiting on some specific funding before they need to make a decision, we just encourage yourselves or students to reach out and check with us and talk with us about the deadlines so we can help in that situation. But no, in most cases, students do have a number of months in order to reply and to be able to let us know whether they would like to accept an offer. So in that time, we'd usually have heard back from the funding. Say if students can apply a bit earlier, then we will do our best to get back to students, to applicants as soon as we can, but it can take a little while. So usually that is why we have quite a long window to confirm whether a student would like to accept the offer or not. Adelaide, I don't know if you, from your experience of, well, perhaps initially with the master's application, if you had any advice for applicants in terms of the process or the interview or anything that you can remember from your process going through the admission side of things.
I think because as a master's applicant, so when I was still an undergrad, I was quite clueless about how to put together a research proposal. The best thing to do, and I didn't know any current Cambridge students and I didn't know about Unibuddy, so I asked someone I knew who had done a master's at Oxford what her best advice was on constructing a research proposal for an Oxbridge master's. But if students can contact any of us on Unibuddy and ask tips on kind of what structure to go for, what kind of things are supervisors looking for, vaguely, just kind of some brainstorming for that side of it. I think that's what I struggled with the most. So it's helpful to ask current students, at least, even if it's not someone doing the same exact degree. I think within a certain field, we can give decent advice, hopefully.
Absolutely, yeah, good advice. And the Unibuddy section of the university website is available there for anybody to access to ask those questions as well. Adelaide, this is one for you, but we've had a question in from Elizabeth asking about partner colleges with Oxford. So in the past, I think Claire has had exchange dinners with their partner college with Oriel at Oxford. Do you know, is that something that still happens?
It's definitely something that still happens. I haven't gotten to go to that yet because I've only been here for, this is my second year, and it's coming right up this year, the exchange with Oriel. It's a formal hall swap, like I was talking about earlier. So we'll have a few people from the MCR drive us to Oxford just for dinner at Oriel and then drive back, which is, it's an exciting opportunity to get to see a college outside of Cambridge, which is equally beautiful with the Cambridge College, and they'll come to Clare eventually as well. So I think probably a lot of colleges do that with their sister college at Oxford. Certainly all colleges, at least from my recollection, have a sister college at Oxford. So it's a cool connection to have.
Definitely, that's great to hear. I've just shared my screen again, so everybody can see the website that we've mentioned a couple of times with Unibuddy, so postgraduate.study.cam.ac.uk, quite a long address, but if you just search postgraduate study Cambridge, you'll find it. And also the email address to reach our team if there's any specific questions that we can help with. I think we've got a couple of minutes, so we've probably got time for one final question. If anybody has anything else, please do use the chat box and let us know. And Adelaide, just while we're seeing if there is any final question, can I ask, from your experience at Cambridge so far, is there any one kind of moment or highlight that kind of stands out to you that you've really enjoyed so far and you thought this is, you know, what being a postgraduate student at Cambridge is all about? I know it's a bit of a hard question, but is there anything that you've really enjoyed, or really either on the academic or the social side?
I think for me, what's most special about being at Cambridge has been my college experience within the MCR, particularly last year as an MPhil, because most postgraduates are MPhils. I feel like I remember someone telling me when I was still an undergraduate, enjoy undergraduate because life gets really serious after this. Like graduate school is really serious, you're not going to have fun anymore. But I remember thinking to myself, after one of the formals, we go back to the bar in the MCR, which we have music going and people dance and it's a really good time. I remember thinking to myself, that was so not true. Like, the fun does not end in graduate school, and definitely not at Cambridge. So I think just the experience of being in a Cambridge college socially is one of the highlights.
Great. Well, Adelaide, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, reflecting both on your time as an MPhil, as a master's student, and during the first year of your PhD as well. Really appreciate you being able to join us this afternoon. I think that's probably a good point for us to leave it, but please do reach out if there's anything that our team can do to help. You can see our email address there. We can look, as often is the case with postgraduate admissions, some of the specifics which can vary quite a bit at Cambridge from department to department. So if there's any more detail that we haven't been able to cover or answer this afternoon, then please do reach out and let us know. But otherwise, Hayley, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Roshan, and thanks, Adelaide, for both of your input today. I think I can speak for everyone that we found it really useful, and it was great to see the insight on, I guess, the kind of regulation side and also your experiences, Adelaide, as a student there. And I think one of the points that you touched on about having to kind of get used to the more independent study is definitely something that we experience with the Marshall Scholars. They often tell us that it is an adjustment in terms of having a lot more, I guess, self-study and deciding out of a lot of different research articles and literature what you're going to read and all of that. So it's interesting to hear that you've also found that adjustment a bit tricky at first, but it sounds like you're doing a great job as you're now doing your PhD. I just wanted to touch on a few points before we end that Roshan mentioned, and one of those is doing the research about which degree or which course is best for you. I mean, that speaks true to, I think, any university in the UK and Cambridge specifically as well, given that there are so many courses that are very specific and maybe not as broad. But especially for the Marshall application, doing that research is really essential because the application is due at the end of September and the interviews take place in October, November, and then the final decision is end of November, start of December. We really expect that applicants will be applying to the course they were selected with and that they put on their application as their first choice. So doing all of that research sooner rather than later is definitely important. And kind of on the back of that is keeping track of those early deadlines. So from a Marshall context, you know, your applicants might only just be finding out if they've got the award, but then they might have an early December deadline that, you know, might coincide with that timeline. So just being aware of those from the beginning so that the applications can be submitted on time. So those were just things I wanted to pick up on. But thanks again for everyone joining today. I hope you found the session useful. As I mentioned, the recording will go on our website and will be circulated. So if there's something that you didn't quite hear or that you missed the beginning or something, you can always pick back up on that. So thanks again, everyone, and we hope to see you next Monday as well.